last week, we talked a lot about Backrooms and A24. And actually, over the last several weeks, we've been talking about that because it was kind of the ultimate validation of your and my idea of old Hollywood and new Hollywood finally coming together at this point. And I don't know if you heard, did you hear the news about what happened with A24 and Google?
That they bought A24.
They invested in A24.
Invested, okay.
But it was significant, to your point, right? They have a huge ownership in A24 now. They actually spent $75 million to get invested into the company. And I want to read from Ben Frietz here at the Wall Street Journal, who broke the news, I think, who says, Google is investing in independent movie studio A24 as a part of a new artificial intelligence research partnership between the two companies. The search giant is putting around $75 million into A24, which released the recent hits Backrooms and Marty Supreme, according to people familiar with the matter. Although Alphabet unit Google is a major player in online entertainment through YouTube, the deal marks the first time it has taken a stake in a studio. Google's DeepMind AI unit and A24 are aiming to create new tools for movie production and distribution. Their alliance is an unusual one between well-known names in industries that have eyed each other warily since the advent of models that can generate audio, images, and video. Benji, I'm curious about when you heard this news, what your reaction was, and I'm curious about what you know about it outside of what we just talked about.
Well, I remember A24 when they came on the scene and started making movies. I don't know when that was. They were kind of considered a small studio, maybe independent studio. And the stark contrast to now, whenever Judy sees A24 at the beginning of a movie or a show or whatever watching, she goes, oh, it's going to be a good movie. I'm like, interesting how they made that arc from being an independent studio, questioning the content, to now Judy thinks, my wife, that it's going to be a great movie because it's A24. So when Google invested in it, I thought that shows that A24 has risen to prominence and a value enough for someone like Google to spend, how much you say, 72 million?
75, I think.
75 million. Yeah. But also it tells me that Google, which in a way has YouTube, so they're like a streaming platform, is trying to buy up more content. We always talk about how YouTube is the master content machine, but what do they lack? They lack that Hollywood level quality content, specifically movies and shows. This is them, I think, doing it. And I wouldn't be surprised if this will be offered on YouTube. Some of the movies. I think so, because I know they have a lot of movie offerings, but they probably have to license it out. Well, if they invest in it, I bet you it could be. I think it's another sign of the big platforms eating up smaller content libraries.
That makes sense. And, we've talked about this a ton in the sense of the importance of content. I saw this news and I was kind of like, man, this is like the rare headline that I don't know how to parse in this way. Because my first reaction, I can tell you, was, oh, Google owns YouTube. They're investing in A24 after the whole Backrooms thing, because Backrooms was a YouTuber who went to Hollywood, basically. And so Google's like, well, it's finally time to make this thing official, right? And we've talked about this, like the thing you just mentioned, like, well, will YouTube start like investing in content in order to like get like more highly produced stuff on the platform, especially if like this whole Fox thing goes through, and if the whole Netflix and then Paramount and Warner Brothers thing happens, like the competition is getting steep. And so I was like, oh, well, maybe this is that opportunity. Then I read the second half of the headline that was like, oh, it's about AI stuff. And so that's the other thing we've talked about a lot on this show, starting with Sora back in the day. And then we've talked about some of the other sort of AI implications for things like search on the platform. And I was like, wow, this is really fascinating, especially because the director of Backrooms was like, I hate AI. I would get rid of AI if I possibly could. So then suddenly A24 turns around and does a partnership with Google, and like it's about AI or something. So to me, is
it about AI? Is that part of the discussion?
It is part of the discussion. That's kind of what they were saying. And I'll read it again from Ben Frietz here, who says, Google's DeepMind AI unit and A24 are aiming to create new tools for movie production and distribution. Their alliance is an unusual one between well-known names and industries that have eyed each other warily since the advent of models that can generate audio, images, and video. So there's an AI component. I don't know if that's the entirety of it. Again, this is just a story, so this is based off of what has been reported. But like, there's so much going on here, basically.
I think the word AI has a stigma for some people, and then other people, it might be a huge, amazing thing. But let's just think about AI in the context of content creation and movie making, like CGI was to movies.
Yes.
Right? I mean, there's definitely complaints like there's too much CGI in this movie. I think that AI can easily be overused, but also it's going to be used no matter what.
Totally.
Okay, you can replicate a whole stadium full of people, and usually you would use AI for that. But I think even then, well, yeah, CGI. AI is just a better version of CGI, in my opinion, where the computer is doing a lot of the graphics work for you and faster work.
Yeah.
At this point, it's whatever to me. Ultimately, it's the final product that matters, not the fact that they're using AI or not using AI. But Backrooms Backrooms, they probably use some kind of AI. But I know Obsession, did they use any AI or
I am
CGI?
not sure. That's a good
From
question.
what I know, I haven't watched the movie. I didn't realize like how scary it is. But I think that it's like pretty old school, just straight up good old film production, type of movie. So is Backrooms also, Obsession, that's not A24 though. Backrooms is A24.
It actually reminds me too, what you were saying about with Judy and kind of the idea of A24. One of the things that they have, because they are doing like lower production stuff, they're still kind of relatively indie. Compared to the traditional studios, A24 is pretty low budget overall for the most part.
Yeah.
And actually, that was one of the stories about Backrooms, right, and Obsession, which is that these are super low budget films that are premiering at these huge numbers, the best in A24's history. And so AI, in a lot of ways, is a way to up the production value, quote unquote, without having to spend the money that it would take to do these sort of traditional CGI. Now, that's where the debate comes in, right? Because guess what was expensive about that? It wasn't necessarily the computers, although those are expensive too. It was the labor, right? And so there's a level to which now those are artists that maybe will struggle. But that's kind of true of most changes in the industry. Just like with CGI, right? You replace people who are doing the hand painting and the model makers of the literally in Star Wars, the actual physical hand built models that are physically made in the real world that you kind of zoomed in to make look like these big spaceships.
Shoot, remember when it was silent films and then there's a guy that played the piano?
Yeah, he lost his job too.
When they actually put the audio, he totally lost his job. And you know what? You just evolved.
Exactly.
Right? In the art world, everything's about evolution. I mean, YouTube in the very beginning, no one would have ever thought in Hollywood that this digital platform, which was an online library of amateur videos, would compete with that industry. And in fact, that was 20 years later, 21 years later, a film produced by a YouTuber would be competing and beating Hollywood movies from the likes of Disney.
That's crazy to think about.
So you want to talk about the ultimate loser. It's not the piano guy or the graphics guy or somebody painting pictures. It's literally Disney.
It's true.
Literally big studios like that. So, it's the Wild West. And I know we're going to dig into it more, but this is just validation that creators have a lot of opportunity in front of them because this is just the beginning.
And, you mentioned the product being the most important thing, which reminds me of another one of my favorite A24 movies, The Brutalist. You and I agree that either the final line or one of the final lines of the movie was very significant. Do you remember what it was?
Remind me.
He says, "No matter what others try and sell you, it is the destination, not the journey." And that's kind of what you're speaking about. It's usually spoken the other way, that it's about the journey, not the destination. The thesis of that movie is that there's one view into it, that the product is the thing that really matters in the end. What the actual thing you can create actually matters. And so, I don't know. It's an interesting debate to me, but I think I agree with you, which is that, this is going to unlock new levels of productivity, of quality for these films that are low budget that we would have never been able to see before because they wouldn't have been affordable. Speaking of things that make it more affordable in order to make productions, this week we're sponsored by Ecamm, your Max Creative Studio. Now, we've talked a lot about clipping in the last couple of times we've mentioned Ecamm on this show, but I wanted to pivot a little bit here and talk about the flexibility of Ecamm. We started using Ecamm last year at some point, right? Kind of to start doing some of your cooking show. And we immediately fell in love because it allowed us to take a previous setup, which cost $20,000, at least $20,000, right, Neutrally? I think. Yeah.
Yeah, 20, 25 grand at least.
Sorry. Yeah, at least 20K.
And move it down to something that's more like in the range of like 2 to 3 grand, depending on how expensive of a laptop you're getting. And by the way, it used to take like 2 hours to set up, and now it takes like 2 minutes to set up. And so like it has lowered the barrier of entry for us to do more streaming, to create better products, to create more products, to our point that we were just talking about, because Ecamm has been so successful at that. And that's not where it ended, though, because guess what the next thing was? We were originally running this show on kind of a big production studio. Now, the studio is still here, but we replaced the heart of the actual setup with Ecamm, and it's allowed us to do even more things. It's given us PTZ controls. It's given us the ability, which you're going to see today, to use NDI cameras, which let us use our iPhone to get unique shots on a per-need basis, ad hoc. And you'll hear about this in a second, but we've been testing it to do other live stream things that we're deploying out in the real world in like chaotic environments that we would have never been able to do before without having to spend tons of money and tons of time to get the perfect setup. Benji, I want to hear more about what your thoughts about the flexibility of Ecamm has done for us.
Well, the word I'd use is so versatile. So everything from doing a cooking show with my DJI Osmo Pocket 3 in my own kitchen to running a studio show like this. We've done production for like a local play and captured the content in real time. Something that used to take 1 or 2 weeks to edit literally was done at the end of the play, and I emailed the director and his mind's blown, right? So it's like a great production tool. And yeah, as Austin mentioned, we're going to be testing how Ecamm can be used for IRL streaming, okay? Now, we haven't done it yet, but again, we've already tested it. It's going to work. It's just crazy. All in all, beyond the versatility, it's just the productivity of the production. So you can not only do a live stream, but you can actually capture it. And also it just works for multiple platforms at the same time and dual formats. That means horizontal and vertical. This episode is going out onto YouTube in both horizontal and vertical, and that's just mind-blowing, and it looks good. In fact, our producer Neutrally can see a horizontal and vertical feed going out, so he can make sure it looks good in both. It was hard to do that before and almost impossible. And with Ecamm, literally you can do all those things and it looks professional, no matter how amateur your setup is or how pro your setup is.
And, you know, the amazing thing is that if you come from the production world, you know how nitty gritty the details and technical setup has to be a lot of times. Ecamm, once we get it all set up, is so much easier to do and deploy on that basis because of its versatility, like Benji says. So if you want to see how it works for yourself, you can start a free trial at the link in the show notes and use code BenjiTV15 for 15% off your first bill. Again, as I always mention, that's your first bill. So if you pay for the entire year, you get a huge chunk of change off for that entire year of a purchase. Whereas if you do go monthly, which is still great, you only get 15% off of your first month there. So again, Benji TV 15 for 15% off your first bill, and the link is in the show notes. Thank you so much for Ecamm for creating an extremely versatile tool and for sponsoring our show.